Happy St. Patty's Day, Theology 12. I'm wearing my Irish hat in a way that my wife doesn't like it. She likes it when I wear it this way because she says it looks more Irish, I suppose, but I actually prefer it this way because it looks tougher. Anyway, today we're going to learn a little bit about absolute relativism. I need you to get your book out. So if you need to pause the video while that happens, go pause the video. So again, if you're in my philosophy class, we focused on this a lot more in the beginning of the year particularly, but how to read a book, right? How does one read a book? Well, when one is in high school and college, one reads a book with a pencil, okay? With a pencil or a pen. Why? Because when one is reading the book, one wants to mark things in the book that one finds important, even making occasional notations so things are easier to find with little things here and there. So that when one does, say, an essay or papers with this information, then it becomes a lot more quick to access. You don't have to scan a naked sheet of paper. You can just actually, oh, I underlined that. Okay, that's interesting. So different classes were on different phases with this text. The class that was the furthest, I believe it was G period, my bipolar class, as we call them. G period, I think, was the furthest. I think they were actually on page 13 or, yeah, I think page 13. H period, our special needs class, that they were not quite as far. And C period, strangely enough, had barely gotten into the text. So they at least got to page 11, so not too far behind. But I'm going to go ahead and just go through and review what I think are the most important highlights from the first 13, 15 pages, in my opinion. And since it's my opinion, it's also the case that these are the things that I will ask you about on tests and quizzes. Now, how will you have tests and quizzes? Well, I'm just going to send them to you, and you're going to send them back to me via Dropbox. No big deal. If you want to share, your Google, say, document with me, suppose you're not doing a Word document, you're doing a Google document, that's fine. But let me just tell you that there's a way to do it. If you share it to my Benedictine or bdoran at benedictinecollegeprep.org, that won't, I won't have access because it's not a Google account. So I need you to share it to a Gmail account that I do possess, and that is this one. It's called bcpdocbox, bcpdocbox at gmail.com. I'll write that down for you. bcpdocbox at gmail.com. There it is, friends. bcpdocbox at gmail.com. If you want to share, that'd be great. I mean, those are easy. I can make comments on the actual document and so give you feedback like that. And I think that'd be perfect. So let's review our text. If we open up to page 1 gives us our definition, which you should have written down on your worksheet anyway, so you know not only the definition of truth as was defined by Webster on page 1, but what I said in class and put on the board, and hopefully you can see there, truth is when our mind conforms to reality. When our mind conforms to reality, right? And that Pope Benedict said that this is the greatest problem of our time. Fascinating. At the very bottom, last sentence, relativism is the idea that there's no universal absolute truth, but truth differs from person to person, culture to culture, etc. In other words, truth is relative to what each person or culture thinks, that there's no unchanging truths, right? And this becomes very problematic. Of course, this is also inherently self-defeating, right? Because if there's no such thing as an unchanging truth, or to put it differently, there's no such thing as an absolute truth. Or then you have to ask yourself, is that statement true? Is it true that there's no such thing as absolute truth? Is that a true statement? Because if it is, then there's your absolute truth. And the statement defeats itself. So that's the definition. We see that this dogma is self-refuting on the next page, on page 3, at the bottom of page 3. It says the dogma, right? The dogma is a truth, is a proclaimed truth. The one dogma of relativism is that it is absolutely true for everyone. It's absolutely true for everybody. That nothing is absolutely true for everybody, right? It's self-refuting. Good. Then on page 4, we get, hold on, middle page. So only scientifically verifiable statements are true. So anything that science can verify, we can say is true. But moral statements we can't say are true, because you can't verify them scientifically, right? Thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. Well, I can't scientifically verify that, so if I want to take the Lord's name in vain, so be it. But then we have to step back and ask ourselves the question, is this a scientifically verifiable statement? Can I test this statement that only scientifically verifiable statements are absolutely true? Garbage, right? Good. Then on page 5, we get to that selective relativist. This was on your worksheet as well. But I want you to, so on third paragraph down on page 5. Because it is impossible for relativism to be consistent, many people end up being selective relativists, meaning they're objective about only things that they feel strongly about. He gives examples like terrorism, gun control, global warming, but nothing else. When it comes to sexual ethics, when it comes to religious truths, morality, that's all how you feel, right? If you wish to live alternative lifestyles, that's all about how you feel. But when it comes to gun control or environmentalism, or not that environmentalism is bad, not at all. I mean, caring for our environment is one of our duties given in Genesis. However, going nuts about it and making it your sort of quasi-religion is a bit crazy. Yeah, it looks like this is kind of going in and out with the focus because of that stupid giant window that's illuminating behind me. But we'll plow on. At the very bottom of page 5, just under what I just read, can't we just agree that everyone can make up their own truth as long as they don't hurt anyone else? This is has been proposed as the magical solution for everything. That morality is you do whatever you want to do as long as no one is hurt. So are we just talking about physical hurts here? What about spiritual hurts? I mean, it is the case that, I think I'd rather be slapped in the face than made to be humiliated in front of, my peers. That kind of hurt, to be ridiculed, is more hurtful than it is to be, spanked or slapped, punched. Those things hurt, but they don't hurt for that long. To be ridiculed, to ridicule someone on the internet, to ridicule someone, behind their back, to be cruel to someone in word is a spiritual hurt that's far worse, in my opinion, than physically hurting someone, because the pain lasts longer, and it's much harder to heal. Is that a good standard? Of course, that's not a good standard. It's not a good standard at all. In fact, usually, relativists, you have no right to say that this person is wrong. And if you do say that that person's wrong, you're hurting them. Well, but you're now telling me that I'm wrong. How come I don't get allowed to be hurt by your telling me that? Anyway, you get the point. Okay. Top of page 6. As soon as you say anything like, you can do anything, but you should not hurt anyone. Should. That means that this should not be violated. Now you're violating the very principle of relativism. There's no, you can do whatever you want, except, well, I should be able to hurt someone if I want to. Daggone it, why shouldn't I? All right, page 7, looking at page 7. So this is the section, starting on page 6 through where we left off, where it says, okay, I can see how it might be a bad philosophy, but is relativism really actually hurting anyone? And he says it hurts people in many different ways. He says that it robs us of a sense of meaning. He says that if fundamental questions about why I exist, which cannot be answered by science, science can't tell you why you exist, what's going to happen to you after death, or any of these other very important fundamental questions. So those questions have to be answered by philosophy and theology. And if philosophy and theology can't tell us the truth, well then your existence, the very meaning of your life, is invented and contrived by you. And that's terrible. That leads to depression, anxiety, because ultimately life is actually meaningless. If everyone is left to make up our own meaning, well, it's just whatever I've made up. And that doesn't have any meaning. So life isn't something to be discovered, to be found out. This is why I think we tend to identify as certain things. Like, I think I'm identifying as a firefighter today. Why? Because that's the meaning I've given myself. I don't know. Maybe that's taking the conclusion too far. Let us turn to page 9. He says on page 9 that relativism gives no criterion or standard for moral decision-making, but personal taste. So my personal preference is what is my standard for moral decision-making. If I want to fornicate with this person and they're going to let me, that's my decision. No God, no religion can tell me otherwise. That's moral relativism. So when you have no standard, we talk about a moral compass. A compass points always to the north. No matter which direction I point, the thing, always points north. So, sorry about that. So if that's the case, the moral compass, using the analogy of the compass, a moral compass is that my moral compass always points to God. So fornication is wrong. Doing things that lead up to fornication are wrong, right? And when it comes to those kinds of sins of the flesh, they're almost always 100% gravely wrong. But where does the moral compass of a relativist point? It has nowhere to point but to itself. So if I feel like doing this today, if I feel like fornicating with this girl today, that's my prerogative. Where you have to ask yourself some questions. Like, for example, if relativism is true, why are certain things still, taboo? Why is it wrong to take sexual pleasures from someone even if they don't give me permission? Well, that is where you have to take up the position, that everything is permitted except if I hurt someone. And then we're not even in relativism anymore. It's all just silliness. Trying to live and have a society on this kind of principles means that there are no principles. There's no absolute standards that we all have to live by, except, I guess, things like, I don't know, because everything is falling apart now. So sin, he defines sin on page 9. It's not that people now, with relativism, sin is just not doing what I only commit sin when I don't do what I think I should do at that moment. Not that I'm actually doing something that's actually wrong. Good. Page 10. He says relativism deprives children of formation. Right? It doesn't help. We're not helping children grow morally. And he uses this brilliant example of driver's ed on page 11. I really love this. Apply the principles of relativism to driver's ed, to driver's education classes, and see how misguided our relativist child rearing is. Would we consider it loving acceptance to tell teens learning how to drive that they no longer need to pay attention to those silly yellow lines, holding them back in their lanes? Yet this is how we train the young people in ethics, which deals with how they drive their lives. Left with moral compasses that are directed only by self-reflection and desire, countless young people drift into ruin. But this is the world we live in. We live in a world that's concerned with your physical safety, but not your spiritual safety. And one is obviously far more important than another. Let us move on to page 12. Relativism undermines the right to life. If abortion is legal because of how a relativist society comes to see human rights, right? And then top of page 13, first full sentence, really important. I put a little star there. I think G period read up to this point. Rights come to be regarded as favors granted by the state or by a majority vote. This is even the case with what was once seen as the inalienable right to life. Inalienable means that you can't take it away. So this is what happens when relativism takes over. Rights come to be regarded or are thought of as favors given to us by the government. That's not right. Rights are not given to us by the government, they're given to us by God. This is why I have a right to life, you have a right to life. In this country, it is a federal crime to disturb the nest of a bald eagle, our national symbol. It is a federal crime to destroy a bald eagle egg or to take one from its nest. But a human embryo, that's a different story. Good. And then page 14. Oh yeah, this stuff on page 14 about human life and society, or in science rather, human life and science. It is assumed, this is at the very bottom, that we can progress scientifically. However, there seems to be less and less regard for whether or not we should. If you want to read something really good, read Jurassic Park, the actual book. The movie's great, book's 10 times as good. In Jurassic Park, Ian Malcolm, the mathematician, gives a brilliant little diatribe on whether Hammond, the old man that's running the park, should be doing what he's doing. And he's just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should do something. Just because the science has allowed us to replicate and clone something, does that mean we should necessarily just do it? Or should this be thought out by all sorts of different communities? Not just the scientists involved. Who knows? But that's a really great discussion of this point. But just because we can doesn't always mean that we should. Very good. So listen, that'll do it for today. This is about almost 20 minutes video, and that's almost a whole class, which is great. I want you to send me any questions you have. I want you to join my Zoom meeting at least once this week to get a participation grade, and discuss this stuff. And I want you to read pages 15, starting here, right, number 6. Page 15 through 19, all right? Top of 19. To the bottom of 19, because that page 20 is tolerance, this new thing. So through 19. It's not long. It's a tiny little book. It won't take you long at all. Read with your pencil, okay? Read with your pencil. Read with a second pencil. Read with 2 pencils, all right? So I will see you guys in the next one, which will be tomorrow. Please say your prayers and pray that this whole lunacy ends sometime soon. I really would prefer to be sitting at this infected table with you guys instead of talking to a machine, and in this case, looking back at myself and seeing how ridiculous I look. I'm just, it's ridiculous. I pray that you all are well, and I miss you guys and look forward to seeing you soon.